The city was drowning under a sky that had forgotten the sun. Rain lashed against the cold glass of skyscrapers, each drop a tiny hammer against the windows. Through this relentless downpour, a young woman named Emily Brooks ran, her every step a desperate splash on the slick pavement. She was heading for the towering beacon of corporate power, Drake Industries, a place where dreams were either made or mercilessly crushed. Her clothes, though old, had been clean when she left home, a small victory against the poverty that clung to her life. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. A luxury car, sleek and black as a panther, tore through a large puddle, sending a tidal wave of muddy water crashing over her. The force knocked her off her feet, and she landed hard in the dirty water. For a moment, she just lay there, the cold seeping into her bones. Her hair was a tangled, wet mess, her face streaked with grime, and her simple dress was now a canvas of brown mud. Passersby, sheltered under their expensive umbrellas, stopped to stare. Some pointed, their whispers like sharp little stones. A few even laughed, their amusement a bitter pill for Emily to swallow. She felt her heart crack, a tiny fracture in her already fragile hope, but she couldn't afford to shatter. With a resolve born from desperation, Emily pushed herself up. Her hands trembled, but her will was iron. Today was not just any day. It was the day of the most important job interview of her life. The executive assistant position at Drake Industries wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. It was the difference between keeping her small apartment and being out on the street. The only hope she had of affording the medicine her sick mother so desperately needed. Failure was not an option. She used the back of her hands to wipe the mud from her face, smearing it further. Taking a deep, shuddering breath that did little to calm her racing heart, she forced her legs to move, one step at a time, toward the revolving glass doors of the building that held her future. The lobby of Drake Industries was a world away from the gritty, rain-soaked streets. It was a cathedral of wealth. The floors were polished marble that reflected the golden glow of the elevators. Men and women in tailored suits moved with an air of unshakable confidence, their expensive shoes clicking softly on the pristine ground. In this gleaming, opulent space, Emily felt herself shrink. She was a ghost at the feast, a smudge on a perfect painting. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a look of detached professionalism, glanced up. Her eyes widened, her professional mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "Ma'am, are you here for a delivery?" she asked, her tone dripping with polite condescension. Emily shook her head, her wet hair flinging droplets onto the marble floor. Her voice was barely a whisper. "No. I'm here for the executive assistant interview." The receptionist blinked, her disbelief palpable. From the plush waiting area, other candidates, all impeccably dressed, turned to stare. The air filled with hushed whispers and poorly concealed snickers. Emily could feel their judgment, like a physical weight, pressing down on her. She instinctively tried to hide her trembling hands, tucking them behind her back. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to run from this place of polished perfection and casual cruelty. But she couldn't. The image of her mother's pale, tired face flashed in her mind. She had no other choice but to stay. She had to endure. High above the lobby, in an office that overlooked the entire city, Ethan Drake was having a terrible day. The young, enigmatic billionaire and CEO of Drake Industries paced his office, his patience worn thin. He despised the sycophants, the pretenders who paraded through his office. Their resumes polished, but their intentions transparently greedy. So far, every candidate had been a variation of the same theme: fake smiles and a lust for his fortune, not the job. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, and glanced at the security monitors on his desk. His eyes scanned the various feeds hallways, elevators, the lobby, and then he stopped. His gaze locked onto one screen, the one showing the main entrance. He saw a girl covered head-to-toe in mud, looking utterly lost and out of place. But as he looked closer, he saw something else. He saw her chin lift. He saw her shoulders straighten. Amidst the stares and the laughter, she stood her ground. She was nervous, yes, but there was a flicker of defiance, a raw bravery that cut through her disheveled appearance. Ethan felt a jolt, a spark of genuine curiosity that he hadn't experienced in a very long time. It was a stark contrast to the bland, rehearsed perfection he'd been subjected to all morning. "Send her up," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the office. His HR team, assembled near his desk, froze. The head of HR, a man named Mr. Henderson, looked at him in confusion. "But sir, look at her." Ethan didn't take his eyes off the monitor. "Send her up," he repeated, each word deliberate and firm, leaving no room for argument. When Emily was finally called, she walked into the CEO's office with her head bowed, her eyes fixed on the plush carpet. She braced herself for more ridicule, for the final, crushing blow of dismissal. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence was deafening. Then, she heard a chair scrape back and the soft sound of footsteps. "Miss, what happened?" The voice was surprisingly gentle, devoid of the judgment she had expected. She risked a glance upward. Ethan Drake was standing in front of her, his handsome face etched with concern, not disgust. She was momentarily stunned by his eyes. They were a deep, piercing blue, and in them, she saw not contempt, but a startling clarity. He was really looking at her. Emily quickly dropped her gaze back to the floor, the shame washing over her again. "I'm sorry, sir, it was an accident. I fell in the mud outside." Her voice started to crack, thick with unshed tears. "But I couldn't go back home. I really need this job." She willed herself not to cry, to not show any more weakness. A profound and unfamiliar feeling settled over Ethan. It was respect. This girl, humiliated and drenched, had walked through a gauntlet of scorn to be here. She hadn't made excuses. She hadn't complained. She had simply shown up, against all odds. Mr. Henderson leaned in and whispered to Ethan, his voice urgent. "Sir, with all due respect, we should reschedule. Or perhaps, just cancel her interview." Ethan's eyes never left Emily. He saw her shivering slightly, her hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. He saw the embarrassment warring with a fierce, unbreakable strength in her posture. He saw her. And in that moment, he made a decision that sent a ripple of shock through his entire staff. "No," he said, his voice clear and decisive. "She will be interviewed, and I want to talk to her. Personally." Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with confusion. Was this a trick? A new form of humiliation? But then, Ethan offered her a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile that didn't mock or pity, but seemed to understand. And in that quiet, charged moment, something shifted in the universe of the powerful CEO and the mud-stained girl. Something unexpected and strange began to bloom in the sterile, corporate air. The most powerful man in the city, a man who had everything, found himself captivated, just a little, by the girl who had nothing but the courage. Emily sat on the edge of the chair in the CEO's private meeting room, her hands shaking so much she had to hide them under the table. She knew she must look like a complete mess. Mudstains covered her dress from an accident on the way here. Her hair was a tangled disaster, and her shoes were still damp. It felt like the interview was over before it even began. She had already failed. But the CEO, Ethan Drake, didn't seem to notice her clothes. His gaze was fixed on her eyes, searching for something deeper, something beyond the surface. He leaned back in his expensive leather chair, his voice surprisingly calm and gentle. "Emily, tell me, why didn't you go home to change after the accident?" Emily swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it difficult to speak. "Because I didn't have time, and I couldn't bear to lose this chance. I really need this job. My mother is sick, and I'm the only one she has to take care of her." She couldn't meet his gaze and dropped her eyes to the floor. "I'm so sorry for my appearance, sir." A strange feeling, a strong pull, tugged at Ethan's chest. For years, he'd seen countless candidates walk into this very office. They all came with perfectly tailored suits, expensive perfumes, and an air of flawless confidence. But none of them, not a single one, had the raw courage this young woman was showing. Emily had walked into a place where she knew everyone would judge her, where she was an outcast from the start, yet she still came. She came because she was desperate for a glimmer of hope. "You don't need to apologize," Ethan said softly, his voice cutting through her shame. "Courage is far more important than clean clothes." Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, especially not someone so powerful, someone who held her future in his hands. Just then, the HR manager, Ms. Clark, stepped into the room holding a folder. She tried to maintain a neutral, professional expression, but the disapproval on her face was clear. She looked at Emily with a thinly veiled disgust. "Sir, shall I begin the standard interview questions?" she asked, her tone crisp and dismissive. Ethan shook his head without even looking at her. "No, I'll handle this myself." Ms. Clark looked utterly shocked, but she knew better than to argue. She simply nodded and stepped back into the corner of the room, like a scalded child. Ethan turned his full attention back to Emily. "Tell me about your work experience." Emily took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady herself. I don't have any experience in big companies, sir. I've worked at a small local grocery store, and I've also worked as a cleaner in some offices at night." She looked him straight in the eye, her voice growing stronger. "But I learned fast. I'm a very hard worker, and I never, ever leave a job unfinished." Ethan nodded slowly, listening intently. He could hear the unmistakable ring of truth in her words. This wasn't a rehearsed speech. It wasn't a fake persona designed to impress him. This was her reality. "What about your studies?" he asked, his curiosity growing. I finished high school, Emily replied quietly. I always wanted to study more, to go to college, but after my father passed away, I had to start working. My mother's health got worse after that. I couldn't leave her alone to fend for herself. Ethan watched her, his eyes never leaving her face. He was struck by the pure, unvarnished honesty of her story. There were no excuses, no dramatic pleas for pity, just the simple, hard truth. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a more personal tone. Emily, he asked suddenly, what made you come to this interview? Even when everything went wrong for you today, what pushed you to walk through that door? Emily looked down at her mud-stained dress again. A wave of embarrassment washed over her, but she forced herself to be honest, to show him the real her. Because? I don't give up. Not easily anyway. Life has pushed me down more times than I can count. People have looked down on me my whole life. But I still hold on to hope. I have to believe there's a chance for something better. And I thought, I hoped, maybe this job could be the thing that changes my life. Something inside Ethan shifted. It was a feeling he couldn't quite name, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Her words had touched a part of his heart that he thought had long since turned to stone. For years, he had lived in a cold, sterile world of money, power, and transactional relationships. He was surrounded by people who only cared about his wealth and influence. But Emily? She was different. She cared about survival, about family, about hope. Ms. Clark, unable to contain herself any longer, suddenly interrupted. Sir, with all due respect. Her appearance? Ethan's head snapped towards her, his eyes flashing with irritation. Her appearance does not matter. His voice was sharp, final. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. No one had ever defended her like that. No one had ever stood up for her. Ethan turned back to her, his expression softening once more. Emily, I don't judge people by what they look like on the outside. I judge them by their character, by their courage. And today, you have shown more courage than every single candidate I've seen this week combined. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She was speechless. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back. Then, Ethan did something completely unexpected. He closed the file on his desk, pushed it aside, and said in a quiet, decisive voice, You're selected for the second stage of the interview. Tomorrow morning. Be here at 9 a.m. Emily just blinked, trying to process his words. Me? Are you serious? Really? Yes, Ethan confirmed, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time. I want to see what you can do. Come prepared. Emily stood up slowly, her legs feeling like jelly. Her heart felt like it was floating up to the ceiling. She managed a soft thank you and turned to leave, her mind reeling. Ethan watched her walk out of the room. She left behind tiny, dried flecks of mud on his pristine marble floor, but she had left a much bigger, much more permanent mark on his heart. As the door clicked shut behind her, Ethan whispered to himself, a question hanging in the silent, empty room. Why does she feel so different? The next morning, Emily stood before the towering glass building once again. But this time, she was a completely different person. She wore a simple white shirt and a plain black skirt, her hair tied back neatly. The outfit was borrowed from her kind neighbor, a silent act of support since Emily had no money for new clothes. Simple as it was, the outfit gave her a look of freshness, of quiet confidence. She was ready. As she pushed open the heavy glass doors, her hands still trembled slightly. The memory of yesterday's stares, the whispers and judgments, was still fresh. But today, as she stepped into the grand lobby, the same receptionist who had dismissed her with a single glance now looked at her, utterly shocked. The receptionist's eyes widened. You're the same girl from yesterday, she stammered. Emily offered a small, steady nod. Yes, I'm here for the second interview. The receptionist, flustered, quickly scanned the day's schedule. Her entire posture shifted from dismissive to deferential. Mr. Drake personally added your name to the list, she said, her voice now respectful. Please, go up to the 24th floor. Emily thanked her and walked towards the gleaming elevators, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had no idea what today would hold, but she was here. She was ready to give it her all. Meanwhile, on the 24th floor, Ethan Drake was already waiting in his private meeting area. He'd arrived earlier than usual. A strange mix of excitement and nerves bubbling within him, emotions he hadn't associated with an interview in years. He felt an inexplicable pull, a curiosity about the girl who had shown such raw determination. When the door opened and Emily stepped inside, Ethan felt his breath catch. The transformation was stunning. She looked clean, fresh, her simple clothes accentuating a quiet, unassuming beauty. Most importantly, her eyes still held that same unwavering honesty he remembered from the alley, a clarity that cut through all pretense. Good morning, sir, Emily said, her voice soft but clear. A rare smile touched Ethan's lips. Good morning, Emily. Please, Have a seat. As she sat, he found himself noticing the little things, the nervous way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the perfect posture she held, a conscious effort to project a confidence she didn't fully feel. There was a vulnerability to her, but also an undeniable strength. It was a combination he found utterly captivating. Ethan slid a folder across the polished table. All right, Emily. Part 2 of your interview is a practical test. I want to see how you handle real office tasks. Emily's eyes met his, and she nodded, her resolve hardening. I'll do my best. Sir, he handed her a sleek laptop and a list of instructions. Write a professional email. Organize a folder of digital documents. Schedule a meeting using the company calendar. And finally, proofread a short report for errors. For most applicants, these would be rudimentary tasks. But for Emily, who had never set foot in a corporate environment, it was like learning a new language. She took a deep breath and began. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, across the keyboard. She typed with intense concentration, reading and rereading every line she wrote. When she was unsure about a function in the scheduling software, she didn't just guess. She used the help menu and asked a single, intelligent question. She made a few small mistakes, but her focus was so absolute that she caught them herself and corrected them immediately. Ethan watched her from across the table, not as a judge, but as an observer. He had interviewed countless candidates, most of whom would rush through these tasks, eager to impress with their speed. They saw it as a hurdle to clear. But Emily treated each task with a profound sincerity. She wasn't just completing a test. She was learning, absorbing, and applying herself with a level of care he hadn't seen in a very long time. Even when she struggled with an unfamiliar program, there was no frustration, no sign of giving up. Only quiet, focused determination. She reminded him of a value he felt the corporate world had largely forgotten. Hard work without the poison of ego. After what felt like an eternity to Emily, but was just under an hour, she finally looked up. Her shoulders were tense, but her expression was one of accomplishment. I'm finished, sir. Ethan leaned forward and reviewed her work on the laptop. The email was simple, yes, but it was perfectly polite and professional. The document folder was organized with an intuitive, logical structure. Her attempt at scheduling the meeting was flawless. She had overlooked a minor conflict, but the effort and thought process were clear. He looked up from the screen, his gaze meeting hers. Emily, you did well. Her eyes, which had been filled with anxious anticipation, widened in surprise. Really, but I made some mistakes. Ethan nodded, a genuine warmth in his expression. Mistakes can be fixed. Skills can be taught, but your attitude is something that cannot be trained. And it is exceptionally rare. A wave of warmth spread through Emily's chest. In her entire life, no one in a position of power had ever spoken to her like this, had ever seen past her circumstances to the person she was trying to be. It felt like the first ray of sunshine after a long, dark winter. Just as Ethan was about to say more, the door swung open and Ms. Clark, the head of HR, strode in, her face a mask of annoyance. She barely glanced at Emily. Sir, with all due respect, we have a dozen other candidates with MBAs and years of relevant experience waiting. Emily simply doesn't have the qualifications we require for this position. Ethan's demeanor shifted instantly. The warmth was replaced by an icy calm. He closed the folder on the table with the firm, final sound. Experience can be gained, Ms. Clark. Character cannot. The HR manager's frown deepened. But sir, our company policy, that is final. Ethan cut her off. His voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced all argument. Ms. Clark, knowing she had lost, gave a stiff nod and exited the room, the click of the door echoing the finality of Ethan's decision. Emily stared down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, as a single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. But this wasn't a tear of sadness or despair. This was a tear of overwhelming, unbelievable hope. When the room was quiet again, Ethan turned back to Emily, his expression softening once more. Emily, he began, there's just one more thing I need from you. She quickly wiped her tear and looked up, her heart aflutter with nerves and anticipation. Yes, sir. A gentle smile played on Ethan's lips. Join me for a walk around the office. I want to show you something. Confused but curious, Emily slowly stood up. As she walked beside him, out of the meeting room and into the bustling, open-plan office, Ethan felt that strange, unfamiliar sensation again. A warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. A gentle pull towards this girl he had met only yesterday. A girl who had turned his perfectly ordered world completely upside down. It was a feeling he knew he wasn't supposed to have for a job candidate, a feeling that was both thrilling and terrifying. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. Walking beside Ethan through the long, polished hallway of Drake Industries, I tried my best to look calm, but on the inside, my heart was a drum, beating so fast I was sure he could hear it. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, focusing on each step, trying desperately not to betray my nerves. Ethan must have noticed. He didn't say a word about it, but he slowed his pace just a little, letting me fall into a more comfortable rhythm beside him. "MLO," he began, his voice gentle, breaking the silence. "I brought you here because I want to show you the real work, the kind of tasks you might be handling if you join us." I managed a small nod, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." But I could sense there was more to it. There was another reason he brought me here, a reason that even he didn't seem to fully understand. I could feel his gaze on me, and it wasn't just the calculating look of a CEO, it was something else. Something about me seemed to have captured his attention. Maybe it was my honesty, or the vulnerability I tried so hard to hide. Whatever it was, he wanted to know more about me, more than any interview could ever reveal. We entered a vast, open-plan office. The room was buzzing with a palpable energy, a symphony of clicking keyboards, ringing phones, and quiet conversations. As we walked through, the hum of activity died down. One by one, heads turned. People stopped what they were doing and just stared. Then, the whispers started, spreading through the room like a ripple in a pond. "Is that the muddy girl from yesterday? She looks so different now. Why is the CEO himself walking with her? What's so special about her?" Every whisper felt like a tiny needle pricking my skin. My confidence, already fragile, began to crumble. I just wanted to disappear, to become invisible. My hands, which I had managed to keep steady, started shaking again. Ethan saw it instantly. He leaned in close, his voice a low, firm whisper meant only for me. "Ignore them. They don't know you." The words were simple, but they wrapped around me like a warm blanket. It was a feeling of comfort, of being seen and defended, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. We reached a smaller, more sectioned-off area of the office where a team of employees was clearly working on something urgent. The tension here was different. It was the pressure of a deadline. Ethan turned to face me. "For your final test today, I want to see how you handle pressure." I took a slow breath and nodded. "I'll try my best." He motioned to one of the employees. "Give her the folder." A man came forward and handed me a thick, bulging file. I took it, and my heart sank. It was a chaotic mess of unorganized papers, financial reports, hand-drawn charts, scribbled notes, and loose documents all jumbled together. "This is a real problem we're facing," Ethan explained, his eyes watching my reaction. "This entire department needs this information sorted and organized in the next 30 minutes. Can you try? 30 minutes? I held the folder tightly, the weight of it suddenly feeling immense. This looked like at least 2 hours of work. My mind raced, but then a vision of my mother's tired face flashed before me. I thought of the stack of unpaid bills on our kitchen table, the constant hunger, the daily struggles we faced just to survive. That was all the motivation I needed. I found an empty desk nearby, sat down, and without a second thought, I began to work. Ethan stood back, watching me in silence. I tackled the pile methodically. I started sorting the papers one by one, creating piles for similar documents, pulling out duplicates, and arranging everything by date. Some pages had little post-it notes attached, and I used those clues to figure out their context. When I was truly stuck, I didn't hesitate. I politely asked one of the nearby employees for a quick clarification. My fingers flew across the desk. I could feel a thin layer of sweat forming on my forehead, but I didn't stop. I was in a zone, fueled by a desperation that sharpened my focus. Exactly as the 30th minute ticked by, I placed the now neatly organized file on the desk. "I'm done, sir," I said, my voice soft, my breathing still a little heavy from the intense effort. Ethan picked up the file and opened it. I watched as his eyes widened in surprise. He flipped through the pages. Everything was perfect, cleanly sectioned, ordered chronologically, easy to read and understand. He looked up at me, a look of genuine amazement on his face. "You did all of this in 30 minutes?" he asked. I nodded, my eyes still nervous, worried I had missed something. "I used to work at a small shop, sir. Part of my job was organizing years of old bills and receipts. It had helped me learn how to do this quickly." Ethan closed the file slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. No one in this entire department could have done this so well, let alone so fast. My eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" "Yes," he said, and for the first time, he gave me a warm, genuine smile. "You're more capable than you think, Emily." Just then, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, and the warmth in his expression vanished, replaced by a dark shadow. I couldn't help but notice the sudden shift. "Sir, is everything okay?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, a long, searching look. For some reason, in that unguarded moment, He seemed to feel he could trust me. "My father," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "He's sick. He's refusing help." And his voice trailed off, filled with the frustration and pain that I recognized all too well. My heart ached for him. I understood the gut-wrenching fear of losing someone you love. I knew that feeling of helplessness. "I'm so sorry, sir," I whispered, and the words were filled with a sincerity that came from a place of shared pain. My genuine concern seemed to touch something in him. He looked at me, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest from his gaze. He wasn't used to this. He was used to people who cared about his money, his power, his position as CEO, but I was just caring about him, the person. Without thinking, the word slipped out of his mouth. "Emily, you're different." I blinked, confused. "Different, sir?" "Yes," he said. In a way that he stopped himself as if he suddenly realized what he was about to confess. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face before he composed himself. He cleared his throat. "Let's continue." But we both felt it. In that quiet moment, something had shifted between us. It was invisible, soft, and unspoken, but it was there. Something new was beginning to grow. After the office tour, Ethan led me back to his private meeting room. The moment the door clicked shut, I finally let out a long, shaky breath. My shoulders slumped in relief, and I nervously wiped my sweaty palms on my skirt. He noticed, of course he did, and a soft smile touched his lips. "You did well today?" "Very well." I couldn't meet his gaze, my eyes dropping to the floor. "Thank you, sir." I tried. "You didn't just try," he countered, his voice surprisingly warm. "You completed the task better than anyone expected." For a split second, I forgot he was the powerful CEO, one of the most influential men in the city. He sounded so genuine, like someone who actually cared. He sat across from me, his expression turning serious. "Emily, I want to ask you something important." I immediately sat up straighter, my nerves on high alert again. "Yes, sir." He steepled his fingers on the polished desk. "If I give you this job, what will it mean to you?" I looked down at my own hands, clasped tightly in my lap. My voice came out quiet, but it didn't waver. "It will mean safety for my mother. A roof over our heads, food, medicines." I finally looked up, meeting his intense gaze. "And hope, sir." For the first time in many years. Hope. My eyes felt shiny with unshed tears, but I held them back, wanting him to see nothing but honesty. I saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of an emotion I couldn't quite name. Most candidates probably asked for a six-figure salary, a fancy title, or a corner office. All I wanted was hope for my mother, and it seemed to strike a chord deep within him. Just then, the door burst open without a knock. Ms. Clark, the head of HR, strode in, her face a mask of tension. She clutched a folder like it was a weapon. "Sir, we have a problem," she announced. Her voice clipped. Ethan's friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by the cool authority of a CEO. "What problem?" Ms. Clark slapped the folder down on the desk between us. "These are the final shortlisted candidates. They all have significantly higher qualifications than Emily. We should choose someone with more experience." Ethan didn't even glance at the folder. "I don't need it," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "I've already decided." Ms. Clark blinked, utterly baffled. "But Sir, Emily is the one I want." My jaw dropped. My heart started hammering against my ribs so loudly I was sure they could both hear it. It was a frantic, desperate drumbeat of disbelief. Ms. Clark's face hardened. "Sir, with all due respect, choosing her will raise questions. People will think you're showing favoritism." Ethan rose to his feet, a towering, unshakable presence. "I'm not hiring her because of favoritism. I'm hiring her because she has something no one else. Showed courage, honesty, and a sincere heart." His eyes found mine, and my breath hitched. "And I value that more than any degree on a piece of paper." The lump in my throat grew until it was hard to breathe. I clenched my fists, fighting the overwhelming wave of emotion threatening to break through. Ms. Clark looked furious, but she knew she was beaten. She turned on her heel and left the room, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan turned back to me, his expression softening once more. "Emily Brooks." I held my breath, my entire future hanging on his next words. "I want to officially offer you the position of executive assistant." My lips parted, but no sound came out. My vision swam, the world blurring at the edges. Was this real? Was this actually happening? "M.E.," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "You're hiring me?" "Yes," he said, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "But only if you accept." I nodded furiously, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over and streaming down my cheeks. "I accept, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much." I pressed my hands to my mouth, trying to stifle a sob of pure, overwhelming gratitude. For the first time in my life, someone sought past my shabby clothes and my desperation. Someone believed in me. Someone gave me a chance. Ethan just watched me, a strange, soft look in his eyes. He was a man known for his cold logic and ruthless business sense, not for emotion. But in that moment, I think I saw something else, something vulnerable. It felt like I'd somehow, without even trying, found a crack in his armor. Just as I was starting to process the life-changing news, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, and the warmth instantly drained from his face, replaced by a deep, dark worry. I saw the shift immediately. "Sir, is everything okay?" He sank back into his chair, the weight of the world suddenly on his shoulders. "It's my father," he said, his voice low and strained. He collapsed again. "He's in the hospital," I gasped. "Oh my goodness, sir, I'm so sorry." He raked a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. He looked lost. And then he said something that completely floored me. "Emily, will you come with me?" I froze, my mind screeching to a halt. "And me? To the hospital?" "Yes," he said, looking at me with an unnerving intensity. I don't know why, but I feel calmer when you're around." My heart didn't just skip a beat. It felt like it stopped altogether. The most powerful CEO in the city, a man who had everything, was asking me. The girl who showed up to her interview covered in mud just yesterday for emotional support. This was more than a job offer. This was something else entirely, something deeper, something that was just beginning to unfold between us. And neither of us had any. The sleek luxury car cut through the city lights, a silent blur of speed and steel. Inside, Emily sat perfectly still, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. This was the first time she'd ever been in a car like this, a world away from her own. And next to her sat Ethan Drake, the powerful CEO she'd only met 2 days ago. But it wasn't the opulence that made her heart race. It was the man beside her. Ethan's handsome face was a mask of tension, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, filled with a raw worry that stripped away his usual corporate armor. He wasn't the untouchable billionaire right now. He was just a son, terrified of losing his father. Emily's voice was barely a whisper when she finally broke the silence. "Sir, are you okay?" Ethan let out a shaky breath, the sound heavy in the quiet car. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice rough. "My father and I, we don't always see eye to eye. We argue, but I still need him." The last few words were a fragile confession, cracking under the weight of his fear. A wave of empathy washed over Emily. She shifted just a fraction closer. A small, unconscious gesture of comfort. "You don't have to explain anything," she said softly. "I understand. Family is complicated." Her simple words seemed to land somewhere deep inside him, a balm on a wound he didn't know was exposed. The car glided to a stop before the grand entrance of the hospital. Ethan was out in an instant, his movements sharp and urgent. He turned, his gaze locking onto hers, his voice firm. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. Emily nodded without hesitation, scrambling out to follow him into the overwhelming chaos of the hospital. The sterile air buzzed with frantic energy. Bright lights glared down on hurried nurses, grieving families, and doctors speaking in clipped, urgent tones. The world seemed to spin around Emily, but she kept her focus on one thing. Ethan. She matched his long strides. A quiet shadow offering silent support as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways toward the ICU. A nurse with kind eyes met them near the entrance. "Mr. Drake, your father is stable for now. The doctor will be with you in a moment to explain everything." A collective sigh of relief escaped them both. Ethan hadn't even realized he'd been holding his breath. Emily whispered, "Thank God." He glanced down at her, truly seeing her for the first time that night. The genuine relief on her face, for a man she'd never met, touched him in a way he couldn't explain. It was a flicker of warmth in the cold, sterile fear that had gripped him. They found a spot in the waiting area, under the low hum of fluorescent lights. Ethan slumped forward, resting his elbows on his knees and burying his face in his hands, staring at the polished linoleum floor as if the answers were written there. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken pain. Emily hesitated, then risked another question, her voice gentle. "Do you want to talk about him?" For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, pained murmur. "When I was a boy, my father pushed me into everything. Business, academics, sports. He demanded perfection. Nothing I ever did was good enough for him. We fought constantly, almost every week. I spent my whole life trying to earn his approval and resenting him for never giving it." Emily just listened, her presence a steady anchor in his storm of memories. "But even after all that," Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "he's still my father. And the thought of losing him, It feels like someone is ripping my heart out of my chest." The raw agony in his voice was too much to ignore. Acting on pure instinct, Emily slowly reached out and placed her small hand over his. Ethan froze at the contact. Her touch was warm, soft, and unbelievably steady. It grounded him. "Serg," she said, her voice a comforting whisper, "you don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to be afraid. It just means you care." He finally looked up, his dark, tormented eyes meeting hers. In that moment, a dam inside him broke. For the first time all night, he felt like he could actually breathe. The crushing weight on his chest eased, just a little. "Emily," he said, his voice quiet and full of wonder. "I don't understand why, but when you talk, everything feels lighter." A blush crept up her neck, and she quickly averted her gaze. Flustered, "I'm glad if I can help." "Sir." Just then, a doctor in blue scrubs entered the waiting area. "Mr. Drake." Ethan shot to his feet, Emily rising with him. "Your father is conscious. You can see him now, but only one person at a time." Ethan looked at Emily, and she immediately took a step back, ready to give him his privacy. "You should go, sir. He needs to see you." But Ethan shook his head, a decisive, almost desperate movement. "No," he said, his eyes pleading with hers. "Come with me, please." Emily's heart did a little flip-flop in her chest. She had no place in that room, but the look on his face told her he needed her there. She gave a small, soft nod. Together, they walked into the private room. Mr. Richard Drake, a man whose reputation was as formidable as his son's, looked frail and small against the stark white sheets. His breathing was shallow, monitored by the quiet beeping of machines. As they approached, his eyelids fluttered open, and his gaze found his son. "Ethan," he breathed, his voice a reedy whisper. Ethan rushed to the bedside. "Dad, I'm here." Emily hung back near the wall, trying to make herself invisible, an intruder in this deeply personal moment. But Richard's tired eyes drifted past his son and landed on her. "And who is this?" he asked, his voice weak but curious. Ethan turned to look at Emily, and for a split second, the world fell away. She wasn't his assistant. She wasn't an employee. She was the calm in his hurricane. "She's someone who helped me a lot today," he answered, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. A faint, knowing smile touched Richard's lips. "Then she must be special. If you brought her here." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the woman standing by the door. After a few more minutes, the doctor gently ushered them out to let Richard rest. In the quiet hallway, the tension of the last few hours began to recede, replaced by something new, something charged and unspoken. Ethan turned to face Emily fully. "Thank you," he said, his voice laced with a sincerity that resonated deep in her soul. "For being here, you didn't have to come, but you did." Emily just shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Sir, you don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same?" "No," Ethan countered, his gaze intense and unwavering. "Not everyone. Only someone with a heart like yours." Their eyes met and held, and in that long, silent moment, the power dynamics between them dissolved. He wasn't the billionaire CEO, and she wasn't the temporary assistant. They were just a man and a woman, standing on the precipice of something profound, something that was both. The next morning, soft sunlight streamed into the hospital hallway. Emily was sitting on a small bench, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea the nurse had kindly given her. She had stayed awake all night, a quiet pillar of support for Ethan whenever he looked tired or worried. She didn't complain, not even once. She didn't ask for sleep or food. She just stayed. From the doorway of his father's room, Ethan watched her. Her eyes were half closed with exhaustion, her hair a little messy. But there was something so peaceful and kind about her presence that he found himself unable to look away. He walked over to her slowly. "Emily?" Her head snapped up instantly. "Yes, sir." "Oh, is your father awake again?" Ethan shook his head, a soft smile playing on his lips. "He's resting. I actually wanted to talk to you." Emily immediately sat up straighter, a wave of nervousness washing over her. Even though she'd gotten the job, she still felt intimidated around someone as important as him. "Sir, if I did something wrong yesterday, or here?" she began shyly. "You didn't?" Ethan cut her off gently. "You were, ... Perfect." Warmth crept into Emily's cheeks. "I just did what anyone would do." Ethan shook his head again. "No, Emily. Not everyone shows kindness the way you do. Most people run away from problems. But you, ... you walk straight into them with courage." Emily was speechless. No one had ever praised her like that before. She could feel her heart thumping in her chest, fast and strong. After a brief silence, Ethan spoke again. "Emily, there's something else I want to ask." She blinked, looking at him. "Yes, sir?" He took a small, hesitant breath. would you? Join me for breakfast in the hospital cafeteria. Emily froze. Breakfast? With him, the CEO, the billionaire, the man who barely spoke to anyone outside of business. I don't think I should, sir. People might misunderstand. Ethan's smile was gentle and reassuring. People will always misunderstand, but I want you there. The way he said it, so soft, so hopeful, made her heart flutter. She found herself nodding slowly. Okay, I will come. The cafeteria was nearly empty at this early hour. Ethan ordered food for both of them, even as Emily tried to protest. You don't have to do that. I want to, he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. They sat across from each other, a quiet space between them. Emily ate her food in tiny, careful bites, while Ethan watched her with a warm smile. You know, he began, breaking the comfortable silence, when you walked into that interview covered in mud, ... something about you caught my heart. Emily coughed lightly, surprised by his words. See, caught your ... What? Ethan let out a soft laugh. I mean, caught my attention. Emily's cheeks burned, but she couldn't help but smile too. You were embarrassed, you were scared, and everyone was judging you. But you still stood tall. That kind of strength is rare. Emily lowered her gaze to her plate. I've been judged my whole life, sir. If I let myself break every time, I wouldn't be able to survive. Ethan's smile faded, replaced by something deeper, something that looked a lot like admiration. Emily, he said, his voice gentle, I want you to know something. Yesterday, when my father collapsed, you were the only person I trusted to be here with me. Emily looked up slowly, her eyes wide with surprise. Me? But why? Because your heart is beautiful, Ethan said softly. The words hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken meaning. And because, ... he added, his voice dropping to a quiet whisper, I feel something for you. Something new. Something I don't quite understand yet. Emily's fingers trembled where they rested on the table. Sir, you're my boss. People will say things. I don't care what people say, Ethan whispered back, his gaze intense. I only care about what's true. Emily's eyes softened, a question forming in them. And ... What is true? The air in the quiet cafeteria grew still. Ethan leaned forward, his voice barely audible. Then I'm starting to fall for you, Emily. Her lips parted in shock. She couldn't breathe. I know you're new here, he continued, wanting to explain everything. I know this is all sudden and completely unexpected, but I don't want to hide this. Not from you. Emily swallowed hard, trying to process his confession. Tears welled up in her eyes, soft, quiet, happy tears. Sir, ... I don't know what will happen. I'm scared, she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. His touch was warm and steady. Then let's be scared together, he said softly. Emily looked down at his hand covering hers, then back up into his eyes. And for the first time in a very, very long time, she didn't feel poor, she didn't feel small, she didn't feel unworthy. She felt seen, she felt valued, she felt ... loved. When they returned to his father's room a little while later, Richard Drake was awake. He saw them enter together, and a knowing smile spread across his face. Leaning close to her, Ethan whispered, This is just the beginning. Emily blushed, but her heart was full to bursting. From a mud-covered girl at a job interview, desperate for a chance, to the woman who had captured the heart of a millionaire CEO, her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss what happens next. See you in the next video.